I really want to say I love the way that you brought this down to individualization because, we're libertarians. We're all about the individual.
She went on the next year to found the Association of Libertarian Feminists because she wanted to address feminist concerns with libertarian solutions rather than statist solutions.
And I mean, look, I'm female, I'm a person of color, I have a transgender child, I'm a fucking unicorn in a lot of ways.
Basically every year I find that the topic of why aren't there more women involved in liberty comes up at on the internet.
I mean, our side sucks at talking to people. We use anarchy versus minarchy, we use downward sloping demand curves, we tell people to read Human Action. My husband quotes Mises at least 4 times a day. I mean, you're not going to reach anyone, men or women, outside of our own little bubble, right? So you have to tell stories, you have to personalize.
And she didn't get a lot of support from other libertarians about that. They're like, well, who cares about these things? But she cared about abortion, or she cared about birth.
The eyes of the law should not see people as gendered. Everyone should have the same equal rights no matter what.
Or wait, how about things have gone downhill since women got the vote? Can we just talk about how fucking annoying that is?
Pussy grabbing thing. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet.
It's not coffee for the record, it's bourbon.
No, actually.
There's also a factor in libertarian circles that kind of needs to be called out, is that there is a lot of, in certain libertarian circles, there's a lot of hostility towards feminism. And I think it's important to note that in 1972, our first, in the Libertarian Party, our first president and vice presidential candidates, our vice presidential candidate was a woman, first woman to get an electoral vote. And she went on the next year to found the Association of Libertarian Feminists because she wanted to address feminist concerns with libertarian solutions rather than statist solutions. And she didn't get a lot of support from other libertarians about that. They're like, well, who cares about these things? But she cared about abortion, or she cared about birth control, she cared about all these different feminist issues that feminists are talking about equal pay and the right and being able to work and not have to stay at home with kids if they didn't want to. And I see a lot of hostility towards that, and I totally get that a lot of feminists are very state inclined Democrats, statists, leftists, whatever we want to call them, but there's also a lot of issues that feminism can talk about that we can tap into. And one of my biggest ones for me is consent culture, because feminists talk about consent, bodily consent, all the time. They talk about how dare you touch my body without my consent, how dare you, they talk about rape, they talk about these issues. But I love to tell people that libertarianism is consent culture applied to everything, because it's about you not imposing on my rights as a person to do whatever I want as long as I don't hurt anyone else. And so I'm constantly going, oh, libertarianism is consent culture applied to everything. And then some dude on Facebook on one of my threads feminism hates liberty, screw them. And I'm suddenly you're really killing it, because there's a bunch of feminists who are now listening to me and going, maybe we don't need the state to get the things that we're looking for in terms of equal rights or equal access or whatever else, or social justice, but then they get scared away. So that's.
And I think that part of what you're saying, and I completely agree with you, I think you're absolutely right, it comes down to definitions in some ways, because the definition of feminism varies from person to asshole, and you just don't know what somebody's going to say when they start talking about what a feminist actually is. And so for those people who say that, feminism is all about exclusion, and building a group, you guys, you're feminists, you just hate men, that's all. I've heard that, and I think that there are people who might come down on that side, but you're absolutely right that the idea that we can, that consent is a major part of this is a big deal.
I really want to tie what Avens was saying to what Terry was saying here too, because I think libertarians do a great job of talking a lot of game about, oh, the civil society will take care of that will be handled. But not all libertarians do a great job of actually attempting to step up and take care of those things in lieu of the state. And feminism is a great point of it. I mean, it's one thing to just yell about feminism. It's another thing to say, okay, great, we care about feminist issues, we're libertarians, let's apply actual libertarian values to fixing these same problems. And you talk about helping other people. There's no reason why we need the state to make sure that people aren't dying in the streets. We are all fully capable of setting up charitable functions, reaching out just on a one-to-one basis, helping other people. And I think that as we talk about shrinking the state and people freak out that we're taking away all these crucial functions, that it's really important, really key that we make sure that we are actively, demonstratively stepping up and filling that gap.
Emailing together before this about what we wanted to talk about. The thing that seemed to get everyone the most animated was the idea that there are somehow some women are biologically not predisposed to like freedom, or they love, you know, big governments like genetically. And so I think I know where everyone stands on this, but I'll give everyone to take some of our ranting that we had there because it was kind of fun. So I'm gonna let Avens start because I think she feels the most strongly about this.
Well, it was funny because I was at the Australian Libertarian Society. I did a talk with Naomi Brockwell. We were talking about reaching out with liberty and how to communicate libertarian ideas. And then someone in the audience asked, well, how do we appeal to more women? And so I said, like, for the love of God, can we please stop saying that women have this biological drive for like a father figure and a controlling state that's gonna tell them what to do. And it's funny because like people will literally be like, look, but they do. Like they'll say that to me. And what's funny is that like if you were to do that, if you're to like reductionize and be reductionist about it, then men being more testosterone, more aggressive, also have an inclination to not like the state. So one thing we need to admit is that most people are not liberty inclined until you really start to tap into it and really talk to them, like men or women. And
it's just so foreign to how we're used to, most people are used to approaching the idea of government and the idea of provision of services and everything. It's just so ingrained that,
and that's because they're lazy assholes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, they call me a libertarian, but people who have that predisposition don't want to take responsibility for their lives. Now, I would not say that in front of a group of people who are like Democrats, Republicans, you know, people who are like, well, that's, you know, I like the state and I think it's great. Because I would call them lazy assholes in front of a room of libertarians who agree with me that if you're gonna be a human being, you take responsibility for your own life, period. It's just the way the world should work.
absolutely.
Sorry, were you done there with your...
I'll stop there.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I can say, I mean, you know, 5 years ago, I kept hearing over and over again from folks like, you know, the real problem, the real reason that we have the growth of government is that women aren't getting married anymore, and therefore they need to marry the state. So what we really need to focus on is making sure that more women get married earlier. Are you fucking kidding me?
Or wait, how about like things have gone downhill since women got the vote? Can we just like talk about how fucking annoying that is?
I've actually heard somebody say that.
A lot of these sorts of libertarians seem to have siphoned off to the alt-right in recent years, which has been like, thank God.
They've self-selected themselves out of libertarianism, which I'm fine with.
Which they weren't really.
Actually, libertarians weren't focusing enough on like preventing immigration and making sure women get married. So like, well, okay.
I think you've missed the point.
She's out. So everyone can kind of answer, do you think that it is still a problem that they're getting women involved in libertarianism or women in government or whatever you want to call it? And also, you know, since we all live in different places, it'd be kind of interesting to hear from your own perspectives what the scene is like when it comes to gender within your circles where you guys all live and work and move.
I'll start with this one actually, because a while ago there was basically every year I find that the topic of why aren't there more women involved in liberty comes up at like on the internet. Like it's suddenly like, why aren't there libertarian women? And like Mother Jones will write an article and be like, libertarianism is an all male white club, whatever. And so then the discussions come out and people are like, well, this is why women aren't interested in liberty, etc. And so I started wondering what the actual numbers were. So I asked a bunch of organizations what their ratios were. And the first thing I found out is that a lot of libertarian organizations do not actually do any kind of check, like, you know, like no like membership registration thing that includes gender as an option. So like you can't actually see how many women were involved in, say, the Free State Project or the Libertarian Party, you know, 20 years ago versus now by any statistical data that's actually trackable. The other thing I thought was interesting is I asked a number of news organizations to tell me what their breakdown was in terms of female to male readership on their Google Analytics. And what I found is interesting is, for example, the Libertarian Republic, which I write for, 1.5 million unique views a month, has 40% female readership, which was a stark number to me because you think like libertarian women are what, 10, 20% of the movement? But 40% of their readership. And most news organizations actually have a higher male readership than female readership anyway. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that like now, to extrapolate from that, it's like there are more women interested in this subject, whether or not they're showing up at conferences or being at events. I'm not sure, but that was a stark thing for me to notice. So
I did a podcast with Smart Girl Politics, and it happened right after it came out that Trump had made the comment, about whatever in the locker room with the guy from Hollywood, and I actually, right, it was the whole pussy grabbing thing, sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet.
It's not coffee for the record, it's bourbon.
No, actually.
I'm not kidding.
We've got all three up here, actually. Water, coffee, and bourbon, so.
And a cappuccino. I like to say I'm very well balanced.
And you did ask for ice, since it's still
It's
morning.
morning, so I'm not drinking my bourbon neat. I was actually told by a friend of mine, as a complete offside, she's a psychologist, that I'm one of the few people that she's ever met that's completely in balance with both her masculine and feminine side. And I think the cappuccino bourbon specifically shows that is true. So what the hell was I saying? Oh, your Smart Girl Politics. So it was, when Trump grabbed somebody's pussy, and then Paul Ryan, when I was actually more offended by his remarks, when he said that women needed to be adored and put up on a pedestal, and I was just like, what the fuck? And we were traveling, and Matt woke up in the morning, I'm lying in bed, and I'm typing furiously on my laptop. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I gotta get this out. And I just did this whole screed against Paul Ryan, and I ended up on doing Smart Girl Politics. And they kept asking me, so how do we reach out to women, right? Like, what issues should you be talking about with women? And it was basically why women shouldn't vote for Trump. But I kept saying, well, you shouldn't single out issues to talk to women. Just talk to women like they're people. And she kept saying, well, no, really, what issues should you talk about with women? And so the two that I came up with are not typically considered women's issues, right? I talked about gun rights, because women historically are, considered foolishly the weaker sex, right? So we need guns to protect ourselves. So
I'm a libertarian because the state hurts people, and I care about that, and I want to address that. And if you talk about real people who are being hurt in real ways, I think a lot of people, not just women, will be much more drawn to the message.
I think that was interesting is you were with me at the Ladies of Liberty leadership summit that we did in DC, and what was really cool is we had a room. How many women were there? Like 20 women? 20, I don't.
Close to 30.
Okay, I think 25 to 30 women in this room, and we all kind of went around in a circle to say how we got into Liberty. And what I found really striking is when I talk to guys, oh, I read Atlas Shrugged once upon a time, and it changed my life, or something like that. And you get those occasionally. I've totally met women who I totally read Atlas Shrugged or read through something, and I got into Liberty. But overwhelmingly, every answer was just I started thinking about this particular issue or something that happened in my life, or I got interested in this one particular thing, and it wasn't the same for everyone. It's some people it was education, some people it was drug policy, some people it was abortion rights. So there's all sorts of different things, and they all started talking about how it made them overwhelmingly feel this compassion that they needed to help other people be free. And I thought that was really striking. Is that they were all talking about how their compassion and empathy for other people made them desperately want to help others be free. So it wasn't just about I want my right to homeschool or whatever. It was I want everyone to have that right. And I thought that was so awesome. Because it was very primal and very I need to share this out, and it was very empathic, and I loved that about it. I loved the way that I heard other women talking about liberty, because the rest of us all were, oh, I feel that way too, and it was so great.
Yeah, actually, I think that we that's actually really cool to hear, because I think that we as chicks are more. And sorry guys, I really, and I am the worst when it comes to gender politics, because I actually think women are more empathetic than men for the most part, if you're going to generalize. And that's why women are more likely to say, I really want to be helpful for other people, because, I want my kids to grow up in a better world. I want this to be a better place for all of us. And I actually think that that's what makes women stronger leaders too, is because they're more focused on that component of helping other people rather than just, I read a book, this is really cool. And one of the things that I see, part of my job at Reason is to communicate what we do to a non-policy wonk audience, which, hopefully we hope is everybody in the United States. But unfortunately for libertarians, and you'll hear this in a couple of other panels, libertarians tend to be very policy wonk focused. They're very intelligent, very intellectual. I have a deep appreciation for that. The problem is that it doesn't always communicate with somebody who's in the street well, dude, why does this matter to me? Well, because it matters because you are part of a business, you're part of an organization. Something that you do is affected by the state, and the state sucks. And so here's how it affects you directly. And I think that the more that we can communicate that as a people, as an institution, or as as a movement, the more we can communicate why something is wrong for you, why a specific issue matters, why this particular shitty regulation about hair braiding is going to affect somebody because you want your hair done in a certain way, this person can't do it for you because they don't have a license. If we can break it down to individual issues that matter to people, I think that's going to make us far more effective communicators and say, well, liberty's awesome, and I really like it because I like freedom. I mean, nobody cares. That's just such a nebulous concept that it doesn't appeal to people who really want to say, well, I don't understand why that affects me personally.
I really want to say I love the way that you brought this down to individualization, because, you know, we're libertarians, we're all about the individual, and it's very strange that then we pull back and say, like, oh, what do all women want to talk about? What do all people of color want to talk about? People aren't like that. People have very specific concerns and interests and ways that they approach things, and if you look at it like that and you talk to them like they're a real person, they'll be much more interested in what you're saying.
Right, and I mean, look, I'm female, I'm a person of color, I have a transgender child, I'm a fucking unicorn in a lot of ways. I mean, really, right? So, but the thing that really affects me most, the thing that gets me motivated is immigration. Because I'm the child of immigrants, and so that's the kind of thing that really pisses me off. It's part of the reason I hate Donald Trump so much. I mean, there are lots of reasons, but that's part of it. Because immigration is a really big issue in the community from which I come, and so when I can talk to people about something, that's when my passion comes through. That's where I become really animated. And I think that we all have different issues. I mean, in the communities from which we come, you say we're from different places, but actually we're really not, because 2 of us are from LA and the other 3 are from DC. They're not representative places here. But I mean, the things that affect us in those communities are, you know, they're going to be relatively similar, but you go to Montana or Wisconsin or Michigan or other places, and the things that capture people's attention are going to be very different from the things that we are interested in. And part of what we need to do as individuals is develop the capacity to be able to communicate with people about that in a way that interests them, that engages them, and that pulls them in. And that happens irrespective of your gender.
Some people being able to fund that themselves. You know, birth control, we have major problems. It's not available over the counter. It requires people under 18. A lot of states need to have parental permission to get on it, etc. Those are actual things that impede liberty that from a libertarian standpoint shouldn't exist. There's no reason why you can't talk about it in that way as well.
Yeah, like dismissing it, saying, I don't think the government should fund birth control, and then that's that. Like, you have to, like we were saying before, you know, you have to be able to show the libertarian solution that could fulfill this need. So
I do know that a lot of people do tend to think like that line, like, I don't think the government should fund this thing, and then like, I know that as libertarians we understand that the next thing is that doesn't mean I don't think you should be able to do it. But I think sometimes it's helpful to just say that. Like, I absolutely agree with your right to this thing. I don't think the government should fund it. I think there should be. I really want to quickly address your point about emotional arguments. Though I do agree that libertarianism can be very logically based, I will point out that every time that someone says, you want to put a gun to my head and make me pay for X, Y, Z, that's an emotional argument. Like, it is a logical argument if you bring the logic all the way there, but when you like tell people that like, you're putting a gun to my head to pay for something I don't want, that's also an emotional argument, and let's not pretend that libertarianism isn't full of emotional things.
I want those emotional arguments. They matter because people respond to them. That's why people like that stupid polar bear on the, you know, the little sad polar bear floating away. Because they work.